coming out the jacket cause we're turning up the heat. I wanna see you clapping when you get up out your seat. It's time to make it happen when we hit these streets. I'm coming in hot and I can't be beat. Watch out now. Everybody watch out. Watch out.
Well, that seems like it cut in really quickly. Anyway, welcome everyone. Unbelievably, episode 57. And I'm really pleased today to welcome Tina Fegent, who's a global marketing procurement consultant. We first met Tina a couple of years ago, and she supported our agency conversations on Clubhouse, spoken at various events, and her knowledge has just simply been gold dust. And I think we learned more from Tina over the 3-month period of the kind of Clubhouse conversations and on, definitely on procurement than we did in the last 10 years of helping agencies. So I really appreciate her coming on today. So since meeting Tina, she's our go-to recommendation for anyone needing to get more understanding on how to deal with procurement processes. A couple of thank yous. The show couldn't happen, of course, without Forecast, our sponsors for the show. They're a market-leading project management software, and we've recently welcomed into our community as a sponsor. They've agreed to support Agencynomics, which is just a reminder for everyone, is a not-for-profit social enterprise community, and our podcast show, Agencyphonics. And finally, a thank you to the team at Cactus, particularly Dan, who's pressing all the buttons behind the scene today and making sure all goes well. So, Tina, welcome.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, Spencer.
Hey, Tina.
I think we should firstly say, probably it's going to be a bit weird saying this in a few months' time with people watching it back, but it's a bit windy outside. And if any of us disappear, it's not deliberate. We've had a few people in the team with power cuts today, so hopefully we can get through it. But I
think we'll judge it by the trees in the background, Pete. If we see the trees falling over,
it's over the shoulder.
Yeah, we're watching your trees, Pete.
Keep an eye on the trees. I think you can see 4. If it goes down to 3, then we're in trouble. So Tina, I'm going to start off by asking you a bit about your background and your career path, because I think interestingly for someone in your role, you've worked client side and agency side over the years.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I was one of the first. I have to say, about 30 years ago now. I thought, what's this?
You don't look old enough.
Oh, thank you, Spence. Thank you. I graduated. I worked for Thorn EMI when I graduated from Brighton Poly, and I worked for Thorn EMI. That does date me. It does date anyone watching. If they've heard of Rumbelows or Thorn Security, it's like those companies.
We're laughing because Pete always uses Rumbelows in all of his documents as an example.
No, really?
He does, yeah.
I have a master rev track document, which is like a revenue tracking tool that I take our mastermind and client members through. And when I must do this late at night when I've had a couple of drinks or I'm bored, and I put fake client names in, and one of them is always Rumbelows. And you get half the room laughing and the other half going, who are they?
Exactly. You have to explain. Well, like Currys, they're sort of like that. And they bought that American company, didn't they, where you could like rent the TVs and the fridges and
radio
stuff
rentals.
Like
radio rentals,
yeah, radio rentals.
And the other one he has on there is Polly Peck, if you remember them.
God, yeah, that as in whatever it was who owned Polly Peck, wasn't it? Oh, that's brilliant. I love it. But
sorry, we interrupted.
Well, I spent time at EMI Records. I met the Proclaimers, came to fame. But hated manufacturing procurement. So I went to Cellnet, which is now O2, Telefonica. Yeah. And again, this ages me. Years ago, so mobile phones used to be, that size and books. These days there's a thing called the internet. And I thought, why is the agent? There was an agent, the advertising agency was buying the user guides. And I was like, I think from a procurement point of view, I'll just go to a printer, and of course it's 50% saving. So I thought, this is quite interesting. And I bought dummy handsets and stuff like that. So that's how I got involved in marketing procurement. I said one of the first globally to do it. And then I went to SmithKline Beecham, so now GSK, and bought everything from sort of, below the line. So the fridges to the Lucozade bottles to pack design. And I went to Orange in its heyday. So just as it was Rabbit, and just went to Orange and did marketing procurement there. And then the French came in, France Telecom, and Fegent. And thanks, Pete, for getting my surname correct. A lot of people split it in half and say Fegent.
I stayed up for 3 hours last night practicing in front of the mirror.
Yeah, thank you. It's appreciated. But I did check into and add a holding company's reception once, and on my badge was Tina Fegent. I'm like, how could you get Tina wrong? It's only 4 letters. And France Telecom came and bought Orange, and even though Fegent is French, I only got 30% in my mock O level, so I didn't do French. So actually, it was Kerry Glaze at the AR said, Gary Lace, a name from the past, was at Grey. Why don't you join ad agencies? So I thought, great, because I've worked client side. And I've never worked so hard in my life as when I worked agency side. I mean, a real eye opener. And I say to any procurement person now, go and spend time at your agency. You don't appreciate how hard they do work. And
yeah, that's very true.
How client focused they are. And I think a lot of procurement people still to this day don't really appreciate
Tina, it's funny when we're in agencies and they're recruiting people and people have come from a corporate background, we were like, are you sure they know how hard it is in an agency to work?
Yeah. And obviously, we'll pick up later about the positive pitch thing and mental health and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, agencies do work really, really hard, very, very client centric. The client will look at 5 o'clock on a Friday. But yeah, at that time they played hard as well. I remember, being responsible for the Christmas party in one of the agency offices and stuff like that. But great insight, just, dealing with procurement people on the other side of the fence. I worked for Gray and Lowe. 2 advertising agencies and set my own consultancy 16 years ago. So predominantly work for agencies, but I end up working more for clients. So I do a mix now. So clients could be anything like reviewing their agency roster, doing pitches. Agencies could be training, benchmarking, and sort of stuff like this. So I'm the chair of our procurement group, SIPS, CIPS, on marketing. Been a chair for that for 15 years. And we try and basically do, be positive and try and educate the baby buyers to say marketing is different. You're not buying wind turbines now. You are buying marketing, and it is different. You're buying people. I'm also the co-chair of the Get SHIT board done for the Conscious Advertising Network, where we've got 6 manifestos like hate crime and misinformation, try and get brands to sign up to that. So so love it. So I've been doing it for sort of 30 plus years. And met you guys on Clubhouse, which we loved, didn't we, for a while? There were great discussions we used to have.
I want to get back on there. I want to get
come back.
You think so?
Yeah.
Tina,
we will do early adoptions.
Yeah, Tina, can I ask quickly? I think that was really brave of. Was it Grey, the first company?
Yeah, Grey.
Quite brave of Grey to recruit you. Obviously to bring that expertise in to help them then deal with procurement, right? That's quite a smart move, actually. Yeah,
I think Campaign reported it as which way round was it? Gamekeeper turned poacher. And it was great insight to say, look, again, 16 years ago, there's still a lot of clients that didn't have procurement, but actually we need to fight fire with fire. And still to this day, I do find that is an issue for a lot of agencies, just understanding how procurement work. And I think, for a long time, agencies have resisted procurement. And I remember there was in the press.
No one, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you've got the, no offense, but you've got finance people, but a lot of them are really great, but a lot of them don't get how procurement work. So it was great to fight fire with fire. But a great insight from my point of view as well on how agencies work.
I think it's a fair point you make about finance. From my agency days in finance, I always found it a bit of a battle with procurement. But if I was approaching it now, I'd just take a totally different view. And as you say, agencies are different business. There's an education piece there, and you're buying people, talent, culture, not widgets. I totally get that. So we've mentioned the word procurement a few times, and I'm conscious that some people have a perception of it that's perhaps incorrect or outdated. So in your own words, how would you describe procurement, and why do brands use and or have procurement teams?
Yeah, well, procurement is there to, one, manage the supply base. And I know, apologies agencies, you don't like being called suppliers, and it is partners, but it is to manage the supply database to make sure you've got the right suppliers in place on the right terms, etc. And also it is to drive, I have to use my words carefully here, maximize the value from the budgets. So be it looking at I'm not saying the cheapest costs, obviously we do quite well quite work hard in marketing to say it's about its value. But yeah, if you're spending X, and marketing for a lot of companies, this is the second highest area of spend. You know, obviously you've got direct procurement. So direct procurement is, if you're working for Diageo, will be the cans and the wheat that goes into the drinks, for example. So you've got direct procurement, which affects obviously the cost of
For the
product.
actual physical product.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's and then you've got indirect procurement, and marketing, you know, obviously would sit in indirect procurement along with HR services, consultancy services, cars and stationery, etc. So, you know, our role is to make sure that you are working alongside your stakeholders, in our case, marketing, and saying, right, that's your budget. And the really brilliant marketing procurement people are getting involved in the budget setting, saying, right, what are your plans for this year? I've seen some great examples in pharmaceutical companies, for example, sitting down with their stakeholders at the start of the budget year and saying, right, what's your budget? What's your strategy? Okay, so do we need to help to go and find a digital agency and not e-commerce agency? What we're going to do? Do we look at different models? You know, I mean, there are 20 different agency models out there. Is it always an agency? Do we bring it in-house? So procurement person should be challenging the supply market. You know, what's the best way to fill that resource? Is it in-house? Is it outside? And when we do, let's run a fair process. And we talked about the pitch process briefly earlier, but that's why a pitch and tender process is there, to treat all suppliers equally. You know, hopefully, you know, be fair in their negotiations, and make sure you maximise. I always say maximise the value for the marketing budget. And that could be making sure that you're benchmarking the cost, making sure that you know what's happening on third-party costs, you know, what's the payment process, etc. So managing suppliers and maximising the value for your marketing budget is what procurement's role is.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. And today, where do you kind of work when you're working with agencies? How do you fit into that process? Were you working alongside them, or is it an education piece before and then they go off and do their own thing? How does it work?
Yeah, it can be a bit of both. So I always prefer to be sort of sitting back, because I think they need to build a relationship with procurement and not be frightened. And I know there are some procurement people that are there and look at the lowest cost, and the computer says no, and you can't talk to all of us. And I think you're always going to have people like that. You know, we've got, you know, isn't it? In any organisation you deal with, you've got the good ones, the radiators, you've got the drains. I think what I try and help agencies understand is people are different, and they've got different objectives. You know, I mean, if you've gone through a company that's merged or acquisition, it could be very cost focused. Talk to them about it. You know, if they have to save 5% on the marketing budget, well, come back and say, I can save you 7% if you basically do your amends in 2 rounds, get all the feedback, and pay us quickly, for example. So I think I help agencies try and understand, you know, there's good and bad, you know, and there's just different approaches, and just understand how to tailor that, but also just be one step ahead. So do you put your fee up to be negotiated down? Do you put a value on added value for this workshop that's £20,000? Are you being proactive every quarter, which I think is still a bit of a weak area for agencies? You know, I rarely have agencies come to me and say, do you know what? I look at our costs here and we could do this, but if you could do that, that'd be great. So it's helping agencies understand procurement, understand that they are different and have different approaches to them.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And looking back over the last 2 years, how do you think the role of marketing procurement especially has evolved during that time?
I think, you know, with COVID, the whole role of procurement full stop has increased and is not much more at the top table. You know, especially in those first 3-6 months, you talk to any sort of head of marketing procurement, and they were having regular dialogues, you know, because unfortunately they were having to turn spend off, you know, look at different avenues. So I think as a whole, procurement has actually gone up a level or two from the last 2 years, because I think organisations realise the importance of the procurement role, and actually maybe have a direct relationship with the CFO as well now in organisations. So yeah, it has really benefited the procurement community the last 2 years. We are much more at the top table in terms of not just from a tactical, you know, what we're going to do about these suppliers, but more from a strategic point of view as well. What's the best route? We're now looking at e-commerce. We've now got data at the centre of what we do. What's the best way of doing it? And I had some great discussions recently with some procurement people, really thinking top level about options, about, right, we're thinking 2-3 years ahead. What can we do to change what we're doing? And almost driving what their marketing people are thinking about and really supporting them. So yeah, it's been really positive from a marketing procurement point of view.
Yeah, it's good to hear. I mean, I think from my perspective, from the outside looking in, you'd like to think that there have been some positive changes over the last couple of years, because at the end of the day, everyone's sort of been in the same boat. So, there's got to be a level of empathy from those people as well.
Yeah, and I think hopefully people are more appreciative of the agency roles. I think, I talked to an agency yesterday, our agency, she said, and they deal with luxury brands, but she said, they still put pressure on our fees. But now we've got a plan of, through the last 2 years, but now we've got a plan of recovery with the procurement team saying, right, we can start billing at 75% and 90%, and you will pay us within 15 days. So I think that's come out of it as well, that probably move from more of a supplier relationship to a partner, which I think is great, because agencies would love that. But actually, who stood with us in the trenches? It was agency X and Y, and actually coming out of it, we need to show and work with them on that side of things.
Yeah, I like that. I think this is, again, my perception of this is that because I'm hearing that perhaps brands are being a little bit more, not generous isn't the right word, but more empathetic with the agency now, and being, trying to beat people up on terms a bit less and that kind of thing. And partnering has become a more common term. I'm sort of thinking that that's because brands have maybe they sort of looked at shopping around for other agencies, and they're sort of realizing that actually there's not a huge amount of spare resource out there. So maybe better to partner with the agency they're with rather than go for a round of finding a new one. How does that feel?
Yeah, and also I think, agencies think we love pitching, and we always have our own language. In procurement terms, it's tendering, but we, for marketing, we call it pitching. As well, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of resource. So I think it is always better to look at existing relationships. Always better to say, right, and that's procurement plays a great role in that. I think, if you've got quarterly commercial reviews or 6-monthly agency reviews that are two-way. I have done a 4-way one before, that actually got quite tricky, where the client had to assess themselves and what they thought the agency were going to say. But if you've got two-way where the client and the agencies are open with each other, you can save those pitches and everything. So I do agree. I think it's much more positive, I think, in terms of appreciating the role and the levels of resource, because we know that agencies are really stretched, and just appreciating the role that they can play.
Yeah, sorry, Spencer, go on.
I was going to say, one of the things that I've always thought is that when agencies pitch, because obviously agencies tend to be more creative, more innovative type environments, and they go in and they pitch, and it's all about the work, and then they kind of like almost expect there just to be a decision, right? You've won or you've lost the pitch, and then what happens is you get told, right, well, you're now being the next stage is procurement. And what I've sort of witnessed, I think Pete probably agree, is that it's almost like the fun, not the fun goes, but it's almost like all of a sudden it's like, well, who are these people? And then I would just ask you, do you find that, because I would imagine that agencies often get a bit emotional then and sort of act a bit, whereas actually really they just need to have probably a non-emotional, calm, rational conversation now about how do they get through this next stage, but instead just tend to resent that part of the process, and then it all becomes very difficult and awkward. Is that true? Is that kind of a...
Yeah, I mean, in any negotiation, be it in our home lives or work lives, emotion is one of sort of 6 different negotiation styles, and it's a hard one. It's really a hard one to do, and when you do, it's very personal. So, I mean, I would say it's a bit naughty of the client, because procurement should be involved at the start. So there's a great sketch that was it Tom Fishburne did years ago, of like agency client sitting there with a bottle of wine, and basically it said, right, now we've done the deal, and it's a hangman, like 50 Shades of Grey with the handcuffs, and it had a sign saying, I use it in my presentation, soybeans, commodities, and marketing down the bottom. It said, now we've appointed you, can you just go around the back with procurement being the hangman with the cufflinks and handcuffs and everything. So it's really frustrating for agencies when that happens, because you should have told us up front. You know, we should have known
Do
that.
you think the agency should have also asked as well, though?
I was about to say that they have to say, you know, where's procurement? I mean, they're not going to like it, maybe, you know, but I always say you should always ask, is there procurement? And look them up on LinkedIn, you know, and just understand. Because actually, you know, if you're dealing with, you know, a procurement person at client X, you might have found that one of your colleagues in another agency you dealt with before. What are they like? You know, are they cost focused? Do they understand value? Do they understand marketing? Well, they're buying wind turbines. And I remember quite a few years ago, there was a buyer for a well-known baked bean company. And she was, you know, been used to buying baked beans, or beans, shall we say. And of course, you know, that's got to be one of the best, you know, biggest categories to buy. And then they got moved to buy, you know, digital services, which obviously, you know, in my view, would be promotion if you work in marketing. But of course, they had the bean buying process. And they didn't know how to buy marketing, and it is different because you are buying people. And I think all the areas, I think it's challenging for procurement because I think, again, if you need your beans, the only one person that really knows about the beans maybe is the buyer. But when you're involved in buying marketing, the stakeholders are very switched on. They do know the marketplace. And you have to be that supportive. You have to know the market. There's no point in working with people who don't. To answer your questions, but it is annoying. But I do think clients in both agencies, you should get it out up front. Because if you want it and you have to go and negotiate, you're like, well, you liked our idea, so why do we need to negotiate? So yeah, and just try and keep emotion out of it. It's not great.
There's two great tips you've given there. One on the emotional side, and one on the asking up front side, because when you look at, you know, a lot of agencies who kind of listen to this show and interact with us through the network are all growing, you know, and at some point they're going to come across procurement for the first time and I don't know how to deal with it. And normally it's an owner-led pitch process, founder-led pitch process, and it can be emotional, but it, you know, and you can't just say, well, it's just business, because it's personal when it is your business. But asking if they're involved up front, I think is genius.
Just get it over and done with. You know,
I mean, the first couple of times,
I
was going to say the first couple of times we encountered procurement in our agency, I think it was.
Was I being a bit emotional?
I got emotional as well.
Never.
Definitely got emotional, but it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, we've won the pitch, and then it's, so we're just going to pass you over to procurement now. And I remember Vim and I on one particular project were like, what the hell's procurement? Like, you know, and then we had this call with someone. They just said, oh, if you check your inboxes now, we've just reworked all your numbers with our rate card.
Oh no.
And then it came up on the screen, and Vim and I said, oh, 2 seconds, we just need to put you on mute. And we were like, like furious. And then we'd go back calm. Okay, well, I think we need to have a bit of a chat here.
Yeah, I mean, the thing to always remember is you've always got time to say, right, time out in any negotiation. But don't fall foul. I worked for an agency once and they called time in a negotiation. And so the client said, oh, we'll pop out. And the agency looked at the client's notes.
Brilliant.
But the client walked back in and caught them doing it. So you have to really, you know, used to read
learn to read
down.
upside down writing. That's the tip.
Exactly. I was sitting next to someone in a pitch 2 years ago before COVID, and I hate sitting next to agencies in a pitch. I don't like reading my notes. And this one of the clients was writing in like this really strange language, and I could see the agency guy on the other side reading it. And afterwards, I said to the guy's designer, I said, what have you got there? I said, they were trying to look at your notes. He said, yeah, it's a language I created when I was at school to pass notes. I knew the agency guy was looking, so I was writing in my code language what I thought of them.
That's brilliant.
That's quite rubbish of a procurement language.
We had a funny story, Tina, on this, where we were it was told to us sort of secondhand, so it wasn't a first-hand story, but it was a client of ours who said that he knew someone who they were working on the train going up to Leicester on a pitch, and they were on the agency were on the train having a conversation about how to price the deal before the pitch. And one of the guys said, I don't know, it feels like it's about 40 grand. So the person put down 40,000 a deck. Anyway, they turned up to this very large company in Leicester to do the presentation. And the chief exec said, so just out of interest, how did you come up with that number? He said, well, you know, we did a time and motion study and, you know, la, 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 la. He said, that's rubbish. I was sitting next to you on the train when you made it up. So, Yeah, those
Oh,
I actually heard them on the train making them.
you're actually sitting on the train.
Yeah, I always learned that, whenever you go to a pitch, never on a train to keep your mouth shut, because I remember so many times talking
Yeah.
and competitors and other people hearing us talk and stuff. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Very
there was
true.
a side story there, but
Yeah.
so nice comment from Tamara just popped in. Big fan of Tina. I've learned a lot from her and looking forward to learning more. It's nice to monitor. And Leanne McCabe says, "Hey Tina, great to hear your thoughts. Hope you are well. Thanks for running the session. That's nice.
That's very nice, yeah.
You've got some fans out there, Tina.
Definitely have.
You have. So what would your advice? I mean, I think Pete was sort of saying it as well. It's like, do you think that every agency that's planning to grow at some stage should probably get someone like you in to give them some basic level of understanding of what to expect when this comes? Because if they don't do that, then they're suddenly going to find themselves in a situation. I mean, I bet you most people ring you up when they're suddenly they're in the situation. What do we do now? And then they call you up and they bring you in, and it's almost like you've got to educate them and solve the problem, right? So, I mean, maybe it's a bit of an obvious question, but really people should really bring you in early, shouldn't they?
They should, or invest in resource themselves. There's there are other consultants around like me. There's a few competitors. Or just invest in time in understanding procurement. I mean, we've got SIPS, which is our trade body. We have got a magazine called Supply Management, and which is very
subscribes to that.
90% of it is about public procurement and trains and stuff like them, buying trains like that. But I just say you spend time invested in understanding your client, marketing clients. Why don't you invest time in understanding procurement? Because they're an equal partner as much as the marketing, digital stakeholders these days. So it's always better for agencies to learn themselves. And you are going to learn the hard way sometimes when you've had that tough negotiation and stuff like that. But yeah, and the other thing I found as agencies get bigger is they don't share best practice. So say if you've got procurement in client X in an agency and also in client Y, they're not swapping best practice because actually you can learn from a lot of procurement people. So in the first client, if they've got great reporting tools they want you to use, why don't you share that around the rest of the agency to say, look, when you're dealing with procurement, actually for client X, you've got this great fee template, bonus template, ways of working document. And the bigger agencies are getting really sophisticated, in pitches now that I've done quite a few for some big global agencies the last year or so. They are really upping it in terms of documentation in pitches and ways of working, technology. I saw a great one from an agency last year, which I wish I'd kept, was 40 discussions we've had with other procurement clients on added value. It was a great document, and they are really, and the big agencies are really, I mean, it's taken them time, I've been doing it for 30 years, but they are really getting on that. So agencies need to be doing that.
It's what, I love that. And I think you actually mentioned that when you spoke at our big event last year, and it's so true. Every day we go into agencies and we see them adding value in so many different ways, but they haven't written it down anywhere. Like they don't write down all. And this is anyone listening to this that runs an agency, just spend the next couple of months writing down all of the things, how you add value in your client experience when you deliver the experience or the work. Whether it's as simple as I mean, and you're the person that taught me this, which I loved on our Clubhouse once. Even if it's your clients benefit from accessing your training, like you do training, skills training, and you invite clients to come in, that's a value add. But sometimes it's the competitive insights, the research that goes on that you don't really show the clients all of this, or the methodologies, or sometimes, I mean, there were times when we spent hundreds of thousands of pounds learning how not to build big websites. We invested so much time and money doing that, and we didn't ever show really the clients, look, we spent 10 years, building websites to learn now how to build £1 million websites literally within a week of the targeted time to deliver. And it's like writing down all of the small tangible, direct things, intangible things that you do, and just being able to show that to your clients, because it often just gets missed, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it is those little things, like you said, Spencer, you know, and I'm just running a pitch at the moment, and I've put in the Excel sheet, because obviously we love Excel because we're procurement. Even though some agencies then turn it into a PDF, he said, can you undo it into an Excel? Because obviously we need to do the analysis and see how you worked out your formulas. But I put an added value. Clients spending quite a decent fee. And there's been some great suggestions. In one of the agencies, it comes to about 200 grand. You know, lots of round noughts, but, you know, things like access to senior management work, you know, senior management, access to systems, access to research. Exactly like you said, Spencer, access to training. I mean, you know, before COVID, you know, there were some great training schemes that agencies were saying, well, actually, bring the clients in to look at inductions for new staff. And I think, especially a lot of the people, you know, of agencies that you work with, they're probably over servicing. I mean, it is a balance. I had a call yesterday with a top 10 advertising agency on behalf of a client. If I had a penny for every time I mentioned over servicing, it's like, okay, mate, I get it. Okay, back it up though. You know, if you keep saying you're over servicing, give me the data. You know,
Are
so
you efficient, or are you actually adding value? And you know, it's also understanding why you're over servicing as well, right? So
yeah, but it's added value, and like I said earlier, the proactiveness. I really think that is such a strong area for agencies to say, look, we've been looking at your spend on this. You know, you spend a lot of money on photography, illustration. We've actually done a deal with this company or with this freelancer, or you know, it is amazing just to do those little things that the client thinks, oh, good on you, that's fantastic, you've done it.
Yeah.
And say, as you said, Spencer, they're probably doing it but not writing it down, and all you have to do
yeah,
is
I
write it
do
down.
think you're right around, especially at the moment. There's so many more tools coming to agencies to help. I mean, in fact, because of the current situation, because there is at the moment as we speak in February 2022, there's a real skill shortage in the UK, especially, and talent shortage, and so agencies are having to almost be forced to try and find ways to be able to create better efficiencies, change the way they're using technology, look at other things they can do to become more streamlined, intelligent reuse of the processes they do, and streamlining those. So I think all of those things ultimately will be beneficial for the client as well. So it's important that they let them know that they are working on these efficiencies, right, to help the client's budget go further.
Yeah, if you're investing in technology, investing in your staff, then you need to tell the client that's all positive stuff to help the engagement, to help that stickiness, to stop that pitch next year, to have that relationship. Just be proactive.
What's the most common mistake, I think, that you see agencies making? If is there something that you kind of see time and time again, that they could learn from this podcast?
I think it's two things. One is underestimating the role of procurement.
Okay.
And where they sit in an organization, because actually some are more powerful than others. And I think you just need to understand that where they sit, are they, in my view, they shouldn't be calling the shots, but they are an equal partner. But I think agencies do, it's an historic thing. It's like, oh, if we ignore procurement, they go away. Well,
you just underestimate really the influence that you're having over.
Yes.
And
yeah. And I think the other one is the bit like you said about doing the, being appointed and then having to negotiate. Well, plan for that.
Yeah.
So, put in some time that you can negotiate away, for example. Obviously, after you've slept on it and a sharp intake of breath, because if you do it straight away, we're like, you've dropped £500,000 straight away. There's some fat in there. So I think, one is the role of procurement, but I think, anticipating what some people will be looking for, which is looking at your rate card, looking at savings. So plan for that. Having options. We call it your most desired outcome. It's a negotiation triangle. There's basically your most desired outcome, your MDO. Then your LAR, which is your least acceptable agreement, and then you've got your BATNA, best alternative to negotiated bid, which is in the middle. So I think agencies they need to have, we're laughing, we can get the ski trip back on, if we get our MDO, and the LAR is, where are we going to walk away? And your BATNA is in the middle.
I think that's brilliant advice. Well, I was just going to say, so many people practice pitches, but they don't practice the kind of negotiation part, or, like you said, planning for the conversations procurement. What are the likely things, taking a step back, what are the likely things they're going to challenge us on, and having some, pre-prepared ideas to go back with. Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice.
I think you're right about it's the Pete, the it's these things don't come up all the time, and sometimes agencies just aren't. They don't. It's almost like being. I've used this analogy before. It's like being in the army in a way. They drill for one day the eventuality they may have to face. It's like agencies should do more training and more drilling of these situations, so when they're in them, they're better prepared. It's funny, Tina, because I always say to people that we never really lost a deal on price. We would always pitch to prove we were the best option, or we had the best ideas, or we had the best, response to the brief. And then the price negotiation always came afterwards. And normally at that stage, it was we would try and win the pitch and make sure we were potentially the supplier or the partner of choice. And then we would get, whereas a lot of people just come back, oh, we lost on price. And I don't think they understand that, really, they probably didn't do enough. If they've already been told they've lost on price, then they probably didn't do enough to convince they were the right option. Because you'd always negotiate, wouldn't you? You're always going to choose the best agency, aren't you? And then try and negotiate rather than...
Yeah, exactly. In any pitch process, what is the scoring for pricing? It could be anything from 10% to, I've got a client at the moment who wants to make it 30%. I'm like, really? So I think understanding what of a scoring sheet, if you do get access to it, what percentage is pricing. But you're right, Spencer, from a procurement point of view, we would almost want a short list of 2, and then you negotiate with those 2. But at the end of the day, the stakeholder knows who they want to use. And I've only, in my over 30 years, I've only had one client make a decision based on price. And it's a big company. It was a big media pitch. And the savings were £15 million. And that was the only time I have seen procurement overrule a client and said, right, you need to go with agency X because there's a £15 million save on the table. But guess what? In a year's time, the client went back to the old agency.
Yeah.
And so I think, it's really made on price, the decisions. You said it is a factor, but, ideally you are one of 2, that you're negotiating with. And it's just making sure that it's reasonable. I mean, it doesn't help when clients don't give budgets. I'm a big fan of clients giving budgets and briefs, even if it's a range, from X to Y.
We've only ever had we rarely get 2 clients that are in a pitch or procurement, but we had it once. And it was very interesting because the agency with the lowest day rate didn't win the pitch. It was the agency who provided the biggest discount. So it was the agency that had dropped, let's say, from 1,200 to 900 rather than 800 to 700, because I felt, and tell me if this is true, but I think it was something along the lines of the procurement were demonstrating a bigger percentage and actually an overall pound saving as well, because the numbers were slightly higher, but it wasn't the lower day rate. They were still buying on quality, buying the value, but it was just, it was a bit of it wasn't what they said, we lost it, we must have been more expensive, and they weren't. We knew that they were the least expensive.
Which is my point about planning for dealing with procurement. But what I've seen coming out of the last 2 years,
what I said happen a lot. Sorry, just out of interest, is that have you ever been on the procurement side and gone with someone who has cost more money, but the savings been greater? Yeah, so that's good to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, one hopes that obviously the strategy and creative and chemistry, all the other scoring things tick the boxes.
Yeah.
What I do is I never share. I'm working on a big pitch at the moment, and the pitch is next Tuesday, so I'm doing the commercials, but I'm not sharing it until 5 o'clock. So they've got the pitches during the day because I don't want it to influence them. And I'm working on a small little brief for a client as well. And I've said to them, the pitch is a week after next. I will share it afterwards because I don't want you to be influenced by, oh God, they're 3 times higher the cost of everyone else. So it does come back to planning when you're going to deal with procurement. But it leads on to the point that I think coming out of COVID, agencies are getting more selective. One of the big clients I'm working for got a massive media spend, like 15 to 20 million pounds. And one agency, good on them, said, can you do a credentials deck to the client?
Really?
Yeah. I thought, good on you, actually. And then there's another agency, this pitch I'm managing, their fees like way higher than the guideline I gave. And I've gone back and questioned it, and actually they've come back with like, well, this is this. We think this, and I think good on you. A lot of agencies are saying no. As we said, Spencer, at the time of recording this at Feb 2022, it is busy out there. But there's a newfound confidence with a lot of agencies because of resource, as you said, Pete.
Yeah.
And I like agencies that say no. All I would say is make sure you make a decision earlier. You know, big pitch I did last year, we went through a briefing, we had the 3 agencies, it was a global brief. And after the briefing, one of the 3 agencies said, no, the client's a bit prescriptive, we're not going to. But we could have done that before you did the brief because I could have got a third agency in, for example. So I think there is a confidence in there of agencies, and they're not going to have it. But
we've been sort of saying a similar thing to our agencies. I think you know they can only sell the time once if they can't find the resource. And one of the biggest challenges agencies face is that you know they might enter in a new business pitch, for example, and then the client gives them a timeline, and then that timeline never ever happens, right? It's a bit like ordering products off Kickstarter, like nothing ever turns up on time, right? So it's like, so we find our clients, like they've got this pitch on, they've got the resource, and then suddenly it's delayed by 2 months, or because internal processes or onboarding or whatever. And so we are saying to people, look, you know, ask your clients or prospects, well, what are their timelines, what are their deadlines, and how, and always put it back on them and say how good, because they always need to prioritize by the ones that are actually going to be able to support them, because and actually you help them run their businesses at optimal performance, rather than having suddenly a massive gap where they've suddenly got people sitting around doing nothing because they thought something was coming in and it didn't. So I think and in a way it's creating better habits, because the brands are actually in some cases then having to now be a bit more efficient themselves around decision making, and not just expecting the agency to have people waiting around to start work on a project, you know, because that's not how they work, right? They don't make enough money to have people just sitting there waiting for a client to turn up and give them some work to do.
But the hardest thing in the pitch process, well, one is getting your agency list, because there's, you know, as Camilla would say, 20,000 plus agencies out there, but also managing your stakeholders' time. You know, it's especially, you know, on the couple of pitches I'm working at the moment, we've got a private equity guy from New York who wants to attend in one of them. We've got the CEO from Madrid who wants to attend another. So I do appreciate it's not fair. You know, you need to get the agents. It's really funny, isn't it? You know, one of the pitches I'm working on kicked off before Christmas, and the pitch is next week. And the agency is saying, "Oh, we've had too long a time." And then you get the next one where you've got like 2-3 weeks. Oh, it's not enough time. And it's like, I always remember there's a big agency chief. He's left the industry now. Always used to moan about it shouldn't be 3 weeks, it should be 2 weeks and stuff like that. So it's finding the right time, but it's always trying to manage stakeholders' time and then get them in a room to make.
Yeah, that's the most frustrating thing though, because the agency gets given like 2 weeks to do the pitch, and it takes 3 months to make a decision. And you're like, well, hang on a minute, we were there for you when you wanted a quick response. Now, where are you for us when we need a quick decision? You know, to move forward.
You know, I was doing some training. I was reviewing agency credentials 2 weeks ago in London, and they were telling me the story of one of their PR agencies. You know, turned down 2 other, you know, potential pitches, focused on this one, did a great job. Client didn't come back at all. I think that tends to happen when there's not procurement. I think it's when it's just the stakeholder, like the PR manager or CMO or whatever. And then they saw in PR week they'd appointed another agency. And so actually I think the agency holding company CEO is actually going to drop a line to the client to say what's going on. So I thought good on for doing it. So I always stick up for procurement in those cases, because I tend to think if procurement are involved, they are much more likely to be on the case managing the time process, unlike where you've got a PR manager or marketing director sort of doing it themselves.
Yeah. I think there was a question actually that said from
it was nice segue into that question actually.
Well, yeah, did you kind of cover that a bit though? You were sort of saying it was very important that the agency understands that it's not just, you know, you don't put all your time in. In fact, Pete, do you remember that very big deal we worked on towards, you'll probably remember who it was. They paid us a year later. I remember always saying we did more work after the pitch than we did before leading up to the pitch to win that business, you know, on the terms of the balance. So I think you were sort of saying people underestimate, don't they, Tina, how much time they put into that procurement process at the end. What's your view on the balance there?
Yeah, I mean, look at Andrew's question. I think one is pitching to procurement, you know, so one is the tender document. So be it dreaded RFPs, RFQs, ITTs, whatever. I think, who do you think reads those documents? Do you really think the clients read them?
Well, Do you know what? I think the visual ones don't, and then the really detailed ones do. Yeah, because I know that I've
I
learned
count
that.
on my fingers how many stakeholders
Really?
in those
Yeah, not
documents.
many.
So I think the answer to Andy's question is, what is the process? So where you've got quite a paper-driven, RFP document, then you do need to make sure you're writing that document for procurement. It's their document. You need to write it. So
Right.
where are the numbers? Where are the facts, etc. And I think you have to pitch to the budget holder. And who is the budget holder? Invariably, is going to be the CMO, marketing director, chief digital officer, PR director. And procurement's role, I strongly believe, is there to support. And I get asked to score like this pitch next week. I'm not that, actually, I haven't been that close to the creative process. I need to understand it, do the numbers. But actually, to score, years when I worked at Swiftline Beecham, there was an ad for Lucas with Alan Shearer in it. And they asked me for my view. I'm like, I'm not consuming Lucas anyway, but like, please don't ask me. I like to watch the adverts as a consumer now and think that's crap. That's a European ad. That's a global ad with a voiceover. So it's really, we have to tread that fine line. So I think to answer Andrew's question is, what is the process? If you see in procurement documentation, then obviously you need to write that to procurement. They're the ones that will read it. But in a pitch process, invariably it's going to be this person with the budget, which is invariably going to be the CMO or the marketing director. So you need to pitch to them. But please don't forget procurement. If they are involved, we know often it's the last slide and it's, oh, here's the budget. All right, okay, or here's the production process. Oh yeah, 2 slides, move on. But if you know what the scoring sheet is, if commercials are 10%, make sure you've got at least 3 slides that cover that, the team, the fee, performance-related fee. And a few agencies fell foul that last year. I was doing some of these global pitches. You knew commercials were 10%. They haven't read. I'm the only one that's done all the numbers with my big Excel sheet. You need to have covered it off. And there's one agency that just completely ignored any commercials in their pitch. And you're like, you should have made a nod to it. So I think it's understanding scoring and who's involved in the pitch process actually as well in their role.
You've talked about the scoring sheet a couple of times without kind of breaching any confidence as to what different brands do. But what goes into that, and how visible is that to agencies usually during the pitch or procurement process?
I mean, my view is it should be visible. A lot of clients don't want to share it. I mean, if I'm asked to do one, it does cover things like chemistry, obviously. Could we work with them? Can they work with their other agency? So if we're looking for a digital agency, can they work with our, lead creative and media agency? Strategy, obviously the answer to the brief. So be it a creative or technical solution. That's the main thing. So obviously, if you've done a request for information, we've done a call for credentials, we'd have got a lot of the stuff out of the way in terms of other people they're working on, how big the agency is, how small, what the key clients are, etc. So it does tend to be concentrated on the brief question and what you're asking to do, what the creative route is, what the technical solution is, and chemistry. At the end of the day. And that's why I love marketing procurement, because we're buying people. That's why it's so great to get back into real life and have coffees and teas with people, because it's a social and it's a people industry. So that's a big part of the scoring as well, is going to be the people side of things, and could you work with them. And commercials, 10%, we're starting to see obviously things like sustainability, and especially in the UK, ESG side of things. If you're stateside, things like diversity and inclusion is important here, obviously, but it's much bigger in the States. So if you're working in the States, that's such a key area. So things like sustainability, Ad Net Zero, Conscious Advertising Network, put a plug in for that. Those things are starting to creep up, but they're not high up the list. They could be 5-10%. But I think D&I you need to watch as well, with that mix of of the right people in there as well.
You gave us a quote for our book. I've just remembered on that very subject.
I did, yeah.
People may remember that.
If it was about scoring sheets, I apologise because I completely forgot.
No. It was about the DEI. It was about the DEI part and the importance of it. Tina, you talked a lot about pitching there as well, and obviously it's a very controversial subject. Now I know that without naming names, you've actually been doing some procurement for some pretty big global brands recently. What's their approach or feelings around pitching? Do they still see it as an important part of the process?
Yeah, they really do. I mean, They do. What has been good, and which I quite like, is there's less paperwork. In terms of the
Printed
documentation.
assets and stuff.
Well, years ago, you used to have to write an RFP, and it'd be like 15 different questions, and submitting 3 years of accounts. I think what has worked really well, one of the clients I'm working with at the moment, I'm working supporting the procurement guy and just sort of helping him. He's been really good to say, look, our full suite of questions are these 5, 10 tabs and Ariba or whatever. Tina, I'm going to cut it down to 5 for marketing, and then I've done this, etc. So I think clients, people do love pitching in one way. It's not all about, we've missed the agency biscuits and the notepads. Notepads and pens, mostly, but no, joking aside, it is a social bit, and to go and get a vibe for the agency. So Pete and now you start to see, I think what's good coming out of COVID, it's like chemistry meetings you can do online, and that's great.
Yeah.
But you've got to have the pitch. You've got to have one of the meetings. I booked my first internal flight. I'm going to Scotland for a pitch in 2 weeks. Like, oh my God, that's my first work flight in 2 years for a pitch, which is fantastic. So I think clients still like pictures, but I think there is a thing about less paperwork. Let's get to the hub. Let's do.
What's your feelings on the agencies? I have people who listen to the show know I've got very strong feelings about this, but I'm pro pitching, but I think it's up to the agency to qualify properly their opportunity to win that, and if they're going to invest money, they should do it. But it's an odds. They have to work out their odds and make a judgment call on it. I think Pete and I really believe in that, but there's obviously a lot of people out there who are very anti-pitching and this whole no pitch agenda. What happens when you come across an agency that says that we don't pitch? How's that handled, or is it not, in your experience?
Well, you feed that back to the client, and obviously there's some agencies, that say we won't do creative work. For example, I've had actually one yesterday that said to a client, we won't do creative work. And it's up to the client. You can only, provide the information, give a point of view. I think, I admire them. I to have that stance, and if they're successful on that stance, that's absolutely great. But a pitch process, a tender process, is there to assess everybody, and be it buying wind turbines or cans for Diageo or marketing services, it is there to make sure everyone's treated fairly and to make that assessment. So I do like a pitch process, as long as it's run fairly. I'm very open about this is it. And my process is, I like, I've got 4 weeks to do my commercials. I like to have calls with the agencies in between that to say, like, hey, getting on with your fee.
Do you think that having a number of people responding in a pitch helps create better impartiality, to make sure there's not, if there was only one person there could be some kind of perceived bias happening? Like if there was a no pitch agenda, so we don't pitch, well, we're just going to work with you, almost like the brand needs to see a selection, a choice, and then procurement needs to make sure that is an open and fair process.
It's a good question. I suppose depends on the category, doesn't it? Whether it's a category where obviously where there's not that many suppliers, maybe you do want to build that relationship with that one supplier because they've got something a bit unique. I don't have a problem with that. That clients say, well, I want it. I suppose the trouble I've got is if you say, right, I just want to use so and so, you haven't got any negotiation power.
Okay.
Whether you should, but in terms of, are you both setting off on an equal footing?
Yeah.
So that's what I would probably think it's better to. And there are so many great agencies out there. Loads and loads and loads. And it is nice. It is ridiculous when you hear tenders of 12 agencies. That is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And again, you bet you find, like, I was trying to Tinder a year ago, and I said, and everyone was like, bloody procurement. And I said, is procurement involved? He said, no, it's a design director that's done it. I was like, I rest my case. There's procurement. It wouldn't be involved.
It can work the other way. Pete and I had a situation in our agency where we were told we were one of 18 to become an approved supplier. And I took the brief, and we have a qual score that we use, to qualify in and out. And it was the lowest scoring you could possibly get. So I rang around all of my friends and said, hey, listen, does anyone here want this brief? Or can I, can I recommend anybody else to these guys, because we're not going to do it. And in fact, it was actually, that's not true. It was a group company. I rang all the other offices up. I went, do these other offices want to take it from the same company? They went, no, don't be ridiculous. 18 companies, it's not worth doing. And I went home that night, and my wife had gone out, and I had a glass of wine, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to do this response. And I think we won it. I think because nobody else went for it, because it was like everyone else, 18 people, forget about it.
Yeah, brilliant.
We met them. It was like, we just got it. We got the business. We were like, that's really weird.
Yeah.
So sometimes I
It's
guess
knowing that, isn't it? Knowing that you're one of 18, and there are some.
Yeah. Are you quite transparent? Like when you run pitches, do you encourage the brands to share? Do you share, for example, the budget? Do you share the competition as well, or?
Yeah, what I like doing is when I do the briefing, I get all agencies in the same room or on the same Zoom call. I mean, it's quite interesting because you see
they
them
all know who each other are then in
Yeah.
there. You don't keep it anonymous, okay?
Yeah, and then you do the brief. So this client I'm helping at the moment, I said just get them all on a Zoom call next week, the week after, and just get brief them all at the same time. They've all got the same information. You can then follow up. And of course, no one asked any questions because their competitors are there. So yeah, I'm always a fan. Know who you're up against. Budget, I like to say a range. You think okay, it's 100 to 200,000. It's always better to do that. It's always, I don't understand procurement people that don't want to share.
You need to know whether you're in the right pitch sometimes. Like there are times where, if someone said to me, I think we went for a tender once, and I think we had like 5-10 people respond, and we got told we made it through to the next round. And we just, before we come all the way down and stay in a hotel in Cornwall and everything else, I think it was the tourist board there, shouldn't name names, and then they went, I said, can we just double check the budget? And they went $7,000. And it was like, this is like 100 to 200. And we obviously we were wrong because we hadn't asked the question. Although they had refused to give it to us, but we made an assumption if they've gone through the effort to do this level of pitching, it must be a reasonably good sized contract.
Yeah,
so
$7,000.
I know. That's a true story. Maybe it was a few years ago.
Go for it or not? No.
No, I mean, no. We'd actually got through as well, which is a stupid thing. We're like, no.
That's just my hotel cost. You two said.
Well, you read my mind, honestly.
It would have been for the people in the pitch team. No. Tamara's asked a brilliant question, and I think this is actually a question that I kind of secretly would love to have asked. So thank you, Tamara. What's your best tip for building rapport with procurement during an RFP process? I love this question.
Well, one, if you can, because obviously there are some people that say, you can't, and hopefully those days have gone. I think just make them your best friend. Just, do not just get the commercials and say, yeah, response date is in 2 weeks' time, we'll see you then. Say, right, okay, I've got it. I've just got some questions on it. And that's, and I actually encourage that. So I had that yesterday with we were working a client brief, 150 grand fee. One agency super keen, had a call with the guy yesterday. It was 20 minutes. Great briefs, I'm trying to ask about this and that. Today I've emailed the other two agencies saying, do you want to talk to me about it? So I think just keep being their best friend. Years ago, there's a media agency who befriended a procurement guy, took him out for coffee, and actually they ended up using the agency's template for the other client, the other agency. So I think just try your best. Some will say no. Approach them on LinkedIn as well, and because it's good for them to see that you've done that. Find out about them as well. If one of your other agency mates knows they've dealt with them before, look them up. But yeah, I think just try and have that regular check-in. If you've got 2-3 weeks in the pitch process, try and have at least 2 or 3. What if we did this? Use it as a sounding board. Do you mind if we just get 10 minutes? Can I just ask you about this? Try and meet up with them if you can as well. Obviously, it's always nice. Now things are kind of
these are all things that I think people naturally wouldn't do because they would feel like, maybe it'd be taking them out of their comfort zone to do it, I guess. And I think that's the thing. It's if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So I mean, questions and see
I think what response is after the pitch process. I think that's where a lot of agencies fall down, and procurement to a certain extent is because they then go back to their day job or whatever. What engagement plan have you got with procurement post pitch? So if you've got an event, holding an event, are you inviting procurement? Are you having quarterly commercial reviews? Are you having 6-monthly reviews? They're going to be an hour. But what plans? I think that's where a lot of agencies fall down. Especially if it's a not very nice experience and we got screwed and stuff like that. But what plan have you got post pitch? post engagement, because you want a long-term relationship with that procurement person, because they might be at client X now, in a year's time they could be at client Y. Oh, great, the agency, they were quite procurement friendly. And I still like this today, like someone said, oh, can we put so and so? It's like, oh God, they hate procurement, you know. So I think, you know, for me, actually, the bigger thing is post pitch and keeping that relationship.
Yeah. And I guess also what's really important is if you do build a good rapport with someone in procurement, at some stage in the future, I'm guessing that person may get asked by another procurement person, do you recommend any good agencies from my list? And you might go, yeah, I spoke to a couple before and they were very good, and recommend them,
Happens all
right?
the time, Insta. Yeah, and our SIPS group, it happens. Has anyone got any recommendations for X? Happens all the time, because there's so many agencies out there. You know, I've asked you a few times, haven't I? Like, I've got X, Y. You know, and of course,
because you're always looking for quite very niche, very specific things. So you know.
Yeah. So definitely, I think engage with them positively during the pitch process, but also do it post pitch as well.
Tamara says thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tamara.
Right. So I think we've done an hour. That's gone really quickly. I can't believe it.
And our internet held up.
I reckon we could do this podcast for 8 hours with you, Tina, and still, like, you know, you'd have millions.
We should take those Clubhouse. They were great. Those Clubhouse.
Yeah. Do you know? So weirdly, I only started looking back at it about 2 weeks ago, and I was thinking actually it's probably because it's like they've updated the features. So I think we should do, because I think it was a nice format. So yeah, we'll do that, Tina. We'll invite you to come along, and we're just going to have a good old chinwag at the end of the day and chew the fat.
As I said, you know, I paint a nice rosy picture of procurement, and I do appreciate there are some that are cost focused, but I think, you know, my tip is just to understand that procurement people, they are different. They are different objectives, different personalities. So just be that one step ahead and think, right, I'm getting a vibe there like X, this is my approach. I think just think about it. They're not going to go away. We've been here for 30 years. You know, we're getting stronger and stronger. And be proactive. I think just, you know, be that one step ahead and build that relationship with them, because it will help in the long run.
Great advice, Pete. Hey?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate you giving up your time.
Pleasure.
That was super insightful. Definitely.
We love you. We're big fans. So